Pankaj, for making time to join us on this very unique 24-hour conference that we're trying to do. And I have, in deference for it being South India, I don't know if you can see it, but I have a steel tumbler, which basically has my coffee at the moment. But be that as it may, of course, to all our guests who've perhaps joined and may not. I mean, from India, I'm sure pretty much you're aware who Pankaj is. But to all other guests who've joined, I have a simple way of sort of introducing Pankaj. So if you look at the Oscars, we all try and sort of figure out, prepare our speeches, hoping that we get one. But Pankaj is the Meryl Streep of Oscar of analytics in India, right? If I may use that. So he's truly an icon who represents us as an analytics community. So thanks very much, Pankaj, and pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Prashant. Lovely to be here in such an August gathering. And, when I heard the 24-hour this thing, I was reminded of a 24-hour run, which happens in Bangalore, where people take turns to run. So good. You guys are doing a marathon over here.
Indeed. It is actually a marathon of coordination as well. So, but so maybe I think a lot has been talked about AI, and I think there's a lot of buzz about AI and its users and large language models, etc. And maybe it has sort of exploded in our faces these days. But on a more serious note, and given your new role and obviously your journey that you've seen over several years now, you've looked at how analytics sort of help business do better in Dell. You've looked at how innovation can come into a large bank like Wells Fargo. Now you're looking at a conglomerate like Aditya Birla Group, which has interests in everything from fashion retail to aluminium, right? So and at very large scale. So what the general belief is that like running or cycling. So in the age of AI, we are perhaps in our retail businesses, we have come to the theory of marginal gains, right? Our gains are going to be 1%, 2% now, whereas the whole sort of let's say the whole world and the canvas is open for us to actually make that incremental value realization in industries which may not have adopted AI at that scale. So how do you look at both from a journey perspective and given where you are, the variety of things that you handle?
So Prashant, I think the fundamental change that I see which has happened is, I was in GE once upon a time as a Six Sigma leader. And those days, Six Sigma was new. Jack Welch was, pushing it down everyone's throat. While the manufacturing people accepted it, the non-manufacturing people felt why is this manufacturing thing being imposed upon us? But net, the thesis over there was everything is a process which can be and needs to be continuously improved. And I think we have seen stories of Toyota and many others who have continuously improved things, and we all accepted that. I think what has happened, in front of us, and I don't know whether everyone has realized that, is that continuous improvement is not the game anymore. If I were to use a similar term, it would be continuous reinvention, which means we are not solving the same problem more efficiently. We are redefining the problem periodically. Now, this redefining the problem part is easier said than done, because all of us have been trained from time immemorial in our education system on, getting marks for solving problem better. So I think all our lessons learned by and large, and more so in India, has been that can you do it better? Can you do it more efficiently, faster, smarter, all of that? But what is worth solving has not been a focus area. And I usually tell folks, and I tell my kids also, that if I were to tell you, let's say any exam, it's a maths exam, and what are the questions that you think maths should be solving? I don't think we train folks to think about it then that way. So I think that continue to redefine what you're trying to do, what your business is, what your function is a skill set which is not taught, fast enough. And therefore, people tend to keep focusing on, just continuous improvement. And I don't think, while it is good, I don't think, that is the best way of us to deal in this world. And if you look at any of our large valuation $1 trillion companies or fast growing unicorns, I think at the back of it, while on the front of it, people say they are tech companies, I think someone defined a different problem, which no one else had thought of. And then the technology was there to make it happen. So I think we tend to sort of weight ourselves and give weightage to the technology part of it in the outcome, because it is visible, it is in front of you, it is describable. But the imagination, the way of working and the way of thinking that went into it is not given enough. In fact, the framework that we are using right now in our group to talk about transformation is a Gartner framework, which has 3 layers. And I call it the top layer, which is really the strategy layer. I call it that is the way of thinking layer. There's a middle layer, which I call it the way of working layer. And the bottom layer is the way of doing layer. I think we have all focused a lot on the way of doing AI, ML, VR, AR, whatever it is. Great. It's all important, necessary, but not sufficient. So I think that the future, we will all be competing on better ways of working and better ways of thinking, not so much on better ways of doing, because the better ways of doing has been commoditized. There's a lot of people all there. So to your point, if you are trying to steal 1 more inch of market share, I think you are in the wrong game. You need to redefine the market. So I think that's where we have to go. We have to start to refine and refresh our ways of working, which we talk about, but more importantly, our ways of thinking.
So that is indeed a very, very interesting perspective. I mean, I think we focused a lot on the doing, and sometimes what we tell some of our clients, and one of the objectives of this AI Institute, Global Deloitte AI Institute that we have, is to bring thinking from academia, startups, industry, and consulting together. So we have a platform to basically also think about where each other, or also exchange notes on where each other is thinking, right? And one of the things we tell a lot to our clients is what we call analytics at the edge, that, you perhaps cannot, so the incremental gains that your algorithms, superior accuracy or superior, confusion matrix can produce is only that much, whereas perhaps a larger gains are in the ways of working and the ways of thinking, and perhaps that's also a mindset question as well. Right? So, but do you think from a perspective of so with generative AI, apparently generative AI has created so much buzz. So I think the positive thing is everybody, it's like the guy in the cab asking whether which stock tips stocks to buy, stock tips from the banker in the cab, right? So it's getting to that with AI these days, right? So but sort of trying to say that we'll have citizen data journalists, we'll have prompt engineers. I mean, looks like it's even scared Elon Musk to the point that they're saying let's go slow on it, and a bunch of others, right? So do you think that this whole prompt engineer business, that's like the hottest skill today, and so on and so forth, so do you think it'll help thinking more and doing less, or is it more like sort of dumbing down, giving the wrong tools to the wrong people who may or may not know the fundamentals of how to apply it, or is it just our white hair thinking that way?
I think some of the debate makes me, question the taxonomies that we use, and also the way we use it. So all these taxonomies, think about data science. You and I both get approached by a lot of young people that we want to get into data science, and typically some of us have always said, hey, you know what? If you don't like coding or mathematics or something, it'll be hard because this field is so mathematically quant oriented, all of that. So unless you're a nerd, you can't enter it. Now with ChatGPT coming in, should we say that unless you are a linguist and you are not an English literature person, you will be unable to comprehend it, because this is all about English language. And when we start talking about AI and mimicking the brain, should we call in the biologist and say, if you are an evolutionary biologist, great, this is your field to be. So I do think that we have to start thinking more multidimensionally. I think all these subjects and all these departments and divisions were created for us to understand the pieces. I think we forgot how to integrate those disciplines and bring different disciplines in place. So, so when people talk about career paths and what I need to learn and all of that, these days I've dumbed it down to say, there are only 2 jobs out there. One of them is a job which is related to consumers and customers and figuring out what needs to be done, and the other one is related to technology and delivery, where you are, you want to fiddle around with technology and how it can be done. So just the what and the how. You figure out which one are you. And the what and how, don't get bogged down by boundaries of I am so and so and I am so and so. There's only one way of thinking about it. So I think maybe there's a time which has come for us to simplify this taxonomy and use it more holistically, because I think we have been going down a rabbit hole of defining it even, in a more micro domain, and there's nothing wrong in being the micro domain, as long as you know how to integrate it and how do you come out of it and so on and so forth. So that's my thought process in this topic. In fact, 2 days ago, there was this friend of mine, who was asking me, oh, I've been using ChatGPT very extensively, and I'm sure you are using it a lot. And I said, no. And then I reflected upon it and I said, why am I not using it a lot? Because I didn't find a use case for myself. Then I said, why didn't I find a use case for myself? So when it came in, of course, I wrote a poem, sent it to my daughter, who figured out, I couldn't have written it. So the use case was gone. And after that, I didn't find a use case for me to experiment upon. So maybe the thing that I do doesn't need chat GPT, because all the time what I do is I'm talking to people. I'm trying to figure out what are they thinking, what are they doing, how can we work together better. I don't see where chat GPT can help me. So a lot of work that I do, I don't see ChatGPT helping me. At the same time, a bunch of people on my team are using it so very, differently. My daughter that I spoke about, she wrote it to, accept a internship assignment. She didn't know how to accept internship. No, these days they don't teach you letter writing well enough. So she asked ChatGPT to write accepting this internship. And it was a very nice letter. I gave her some inputs and she sent it, because they are used to emoticons and their different language and all of that. So it was a very good use case. I have folks on my team, they are using it for creating JDs for data analysts, data engineer, all of that, and they've created very fine JDs. Now they're also using it to put the CV into that and say, what question should I ask this gentleman or the woman when they arrive? And I'm sure those people are probably doing the same thing. So I think people are using it very creatively. Of course, people are using it to optimize code and all of that. Now, many of those tasks I'm not doing myself, and therefore I didn't see the need. So I do think that we have to figure out what is it that I'm trying to do overall. In that, what is my role? And in that role, can this help? So I think there's no harm in getting very happy in a toy shop and looking at all the new toys, but eventually the ones that you buy ought to be the one that you'll use. So I do think that there's so much of abundance of new technology on, and there's no harm in trying it out. But you have to figure out what is it that we use. And I'm one of those frugal guys who uses very little of resources on this planet Earth, including ChatGPT.
No, so that is so true, and perhaps like the objective, and one of the things that we've been thinking about actively is how do humans and machines actually leverage the best of each other, right? Maybe this is is what you just described is a thought in that direction, right? Saying, as a human, I need to accomplish something. How will that machine be useful to me? And then therefore, I pick and choose sort of what it can do for me. And I think we haven't yet come up with the carbon footprint of generative AI, but perhaps that's also not insignificant at some point that we will start thinking about it. So maybe moving on to a very different topic, and obviously, and as proud Indians, right? I mean, it's very heartening to look at the level of digitization in the country, and therefore the level of applicability of AI. In fact, I was reading a report that 75% of all AI applications are going to be in Asia, right? And therefore, it is truly perhaps an opportunity for us, probably in the last 300 years or so, that India can actually be leapfrog. And of course, I mean, on a lighter vein, if an algorithm can figure out our roads and our languages, then perhaps it can work anywhere else in the world as well, right? So, and given digital transactions, I've stopped carrying cash at least for a few quarters now, and so on and so forth. So, and I noticed that among a lot of people. So, how do you see the India story coming in, and the whole AI explosion, and not just AI, right? The adjacencies. How do you see it affecting real lives? Changing the world for the better, and making impact that matter.
Yeah, I think India's story always seems to be all by serendipity, whether it was the IT services boom of the 90s or whether it is the digital public infrastructure that has come about. From whatever I can understand, I think there are a bunch of these guys who are in the NPC or whatever, and folks like Nandan who brought about this UID idea. Now that has morphed into almost like a digital public infrastructure. I mean, this is the term that is being used, and they have a roadmap for the next 30 years on what they will do. So if you look at the 4 layers of what goes by the name India Stack, where you have the payment layer, which is the most popular one and everyone talks about it. But we also have the documentation layer of DigiLocker. We have the identity consent layer, as we call it, over there as well. So all of these layers which are there, and now people are creating ONDC to sort of disrupt the e-commerce space, account aggregator, and many other things in the fintech space. So I think in some ways they have created a basic digital infrastructure, and they're allowing a lot of other things to happen. So I think I keep sometimes jokingly tell my friends that folks like China and others who build roads, and they have these world domination projects of building roads across the world and conquering everyone. Unfortunately, we can't build our own roads here in Bangalore. So what we do instead is we build software, and then we export that software as a way of India stack and so on and so forth. So I think we are doing what we are probably good at, and we are not doing what we can't do. So I do think that as this whole software ecosystem of India stack takes root in, let's say, the G20, which is where they're also trying to popularize, and many other, newer digitalizing countries, and maybe of course later on even in the developed countries, I think it will just, because frankly, the value proposition, it is simpler and cheaper. Now, in the developed world, in the US particularly, there are so many other incumbents who are private sector in nature. So when you are trying to challenge a private sector incumbent which already is making money, it's much more harder to do that. In India, we didn't have many of those things, and we started off making it a public good, and therefore we are moving in that direction. But I do think that over time, it's only a matter of time when some of those people will also start to embrace it and figure out what to do. So I think it's like the IT services industry which happened in the 90s. This is a new way of doing things, and this is far more, I think, powerful, because it can spawn totally new, different ecosystems. In fact, again, jokingly, I tell my friends whose kids are going to the US and California to study, I said, you know what, these guys are going to get obsolete because they'll get trained on old technology. If they aren't trained on India stack, they're going to get obsolete. 5 years later, when they come back here looking for a job, they won't get them, because they'll say, do you know India stack? And they'll say, no. They say, then you stay there. So
Indeed. No. So I think just for the benefit of the audience, I think, so the India stack is a way to authenticate using biometrics transactions that I may go to a mom and pop shop and with using my thumb or my retina. It authenticates me through like a social service, SSN. And it actually then allows me to therefore access government services, payments, because the infrastructure, as I said, is a public good. It is free, which means, unlike, let's say, some of the popular payments mechanisms which are available globally, where you need to pay per transaction, our transactions are actually free, which means a 20-cent transaction or a 10 rupee transaction is viable, right? And so you can actually go into India's hinterland today, and on a QR code, transfer from one bank to another, from one platform to another, or exchange without spending cash for a couple of weeks, because every tea seller, every little store, every small restaurant that's built in the garage of somebody's house has a QR code that you can actually pay for. But ONDC is an interesting concept as well, which is an e-commerce as a network. So which is, for example, one of the very interesting use cases I found was a coastal district in southern India, where they catch fish and then they sell it to intermediaries, which then sell. So what they can do is create a collective and actually ship it directly to e-commerce customers who are across the country. And that ship merchandise value is something in the nature of $500 million every week or something like that, right? It's massive. So it's tough to get, manage that kind of a supply chain through large e-commerce aggregators of the kind that we have today, whose, obviously gross merchandise value tends to challenge GDPs of countries and so on and so forth. So, but and all of this is also spawning. So if we are today doing, if I'm not wrong, 1.3 billion payment transactions every month or so, and in the country, and that spawns the ability to cross-sell, upsell, to look at where each individual is. There is geolocation data of some of these to try and drive where your digital products need to go to, where acceptances are higher. I'm told one district in our country, I think it is Lucknow, or one of the districts in Uttar Pradesh, which is a province in India, which has the highest data consumption in the world as per square kilometer or something of that nature. So I think truly, the tilt to Asia that we keep talking about in terms of data, in terms of the public infrastructure, has helped perhaps also drive AI and as well, and of course, given the that we have a significant human resource availability as or what we call the demographic dividend, we are able to sort of build some solutions around it, which can truly change lives of those at the bottom of the pyramid in farming and so on and so forth. So fantastic. And Pankaj,
One other point I'll want to make, Prashant, is that, these days a lot of questions are asked that, oh, do you use AI or do you not use AI? And one of my favorite answers is that, do we use maths in our daily life? We do, but we don't talk about it. We go to a shopkeeper, we buy stuff and we use it. So I think AI is becoming already pervasive, and it'll be there. Either we are using it or it is embedded in something that we are using it and all of that. So I think the question of whether AI is probably redundant, because it will happen automatically. I mean, we don't have to worry about it. In fact, some people are worried it's happening too fast. So, I think that question is not a relevant question. The question is, what is it that you want to be? Who is it that you want to be? So, I think there's a question on ABFRL over there that, yeah, so she first decided what they want to be. And then they used AI to do a bunch of things that they did. And similarly, ABFRL, different brands, in fact, they have a new D2C company tomorrow. They are pursuing their strategy. Everyone has a different strategy. They are acquiring brands and trying to make something out of it. ABFRL is growing like crazy at, whatever percentage growth rate and all that. So I think everyone is pursuing a business strategy and trying to use AI wherever it can help them accelerate their business strategy, the way I look at it. And that's a constant endeavor for everyone.
Fantastic. No, absolutely. Very interesting perspectives, Pankaj. So maybe we have a couple of more minutes. So crystal gazing ball now. So do you have a predictive algorithm that can predict what's going to happen in the next, let's say, 12 months? One big thing.
So I think I work more these days in the area of manufacturing, which is where our group is very active. I think that area is a bit slow moving, and when all our conversation, and I'm sure all your questions are more driven by what we have seen in the past, which was all in the consumer internet space, where things are fast. You can keep doing thousands of experiments all the time, taking them to production, during the day and so on and so forth. Manufacturing is a different world. There are OEMs, there are machines in the factories, gathering those data sets, figuring things out of it, making changes, so these are areas of energy optimization, procurement, product quality, and so many other logistics and so on. So I think we are working on such use cases, and those use cases, I don't think anything significant is going to happen very quickly. It's a long, tedious process, but I also think that if I were to crystal gaze longer term, it's easier to sometimes crystal gaze longer term than 1 year, that in the next 10, 15 years, I think the world of manufacturing and agriculture, which we had all neglected for the last 30 years because we felt that China will do all the manufacturing and agriculture was already done. I think those two have to make a comeback, because I think we have neglected that for far too long. So I think that a lot of people will start thinking of doing businesses in those areas, and the creative usage of AI and some of these newer technologies in agri and manufacturing is what I'm more excited about, because there's only so much you can wear and eat and order faster and so on and so forth. I think we have already satiated that problem solving. I think a newer set of problems need to be discovered and solved, which will probably not be in the consumer internet domain, more exciting problem in the real world of machines and agri and fields and so on and so forth.
Awesome. Thanks so much. There are some questions on the chat which we can answer online because we're coming. So thanks so much, Pankaj, for the time. It's always, not only is it a pleasure, but it's also inspiring, and it's also leaves one energized with a lot of ideas when one talks to you. And I'm so glad that our global audience as well as a larger audience have been able to get a sample of that. And thank you so much again for making the time. It's always a pleasure, and look forward.
Thank you, Prashant. Thank you all. Thank you.